My name is Reed Miller, and I am your president of the Rotary Club of Portland. Welcome to our live weekly membership meeting. Before we dive in, I want to remind everybody that we will be meeting live next week back at the Sentinel. If you haven't already, please get registered for next week's meeting on our website, rotarypdx.org. I don't know about you, but I am fired up for our first official in-person meeting back at the Sentinel. The good old days. We are back. After a grueling year and a half, next week is just around the corner and it feels like Christmas Eve. Only better, because instead of getting or giving presents, I get to see all my old friends and the smiles on their faces. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a difficult road to get to this point, but we have overcome challenge after challenge. Our club is not afraid of adversity. We've overcome difficulty in the past, and this is certainly will not be the last bump in the road. Each time we overcome a challenge, we grow stronger as a club. The fact that we've existed as a club for over 110 years says a whole lot about the resiliency and about our passion as a club. This club provides our members with the opportunity to serve to change lives, which is coincidentally Rotary International's theme for this year, serve to change lives. We all signed up for that opportunity when we signed up to be Rotarians. We are here to serve to change lives. I'm going to repeat that a few times to get that through so that we all connect on that. It's important to remember when we're presented with an opportunity to serve on a committee, on a board, or to help with a service project, those are the opportunities that we have to change lives. All right, let's get to our reflection. Everybody, please welcome our past district governor, past president, Rotarian Danielle Banks, to give our weekly reflection.
Thank you, President Reed. According to English philosopher and statesman Francis Bacon, age appears to be best in four things: old wood to burn, old wine to drink, old friends to trust, and old authors to read. It's likely that today's speaker, Scott Burns, will reflect on Bacon's thoughts and add a fifth item to the list: rocks. We appreciate how rocks show up in all shapes and sizes and ages, just like Rotarians. And having a past president like Scott to keep us informed about all kinds of rocks and the soils that they rest in is, well, a good reason to add an item to Bacon's list. Instead of comparing Rotarians with fine wine, good friends, old wood, and favorite authors, Scott ignites conversations with stories that showcase Rotary and Rotarians because we rock. Thanks to Scott and all of you who make our club not old, but everlasting, we rock. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Danielle, for that rock solid reflection. And if you'd be willing to volunteer to give a weekly reflection, Siobhan has put the link in the chat, or you can email her directly. Now I would ask that any Rotarians who have invited a guest to raise their hand, and Corinne will call on you to unmute and introduce them. Or if you're a guest who came on your own, please raise your hand and introduce yourself or say hi in the chat box. Do we have any guests?
I don't see anybody raising their hand, but if you are a guest, go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself, if you can.
James Mills, is that a guest? Hello?
New prospective member.
New prospective member, excellent. Well, welcome. Glad to have you today. Okay, well, welcome, and look forward to having you back, prospective member. I hope you join, hope you enjoy everything today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
He has submitted his application, President Reed.
Awesome, that's what we like to hear. Well done, Terry and team. So it's July, and I'd like to extend a happy birthday to everyone with birthdays this month. We alternate each week honoring birthdays and Rotary anniversaries. Please take a moment to note the birthdays here on the screen and reach out to wish our fellow Rotarians happy birthday. Thank you. And now please welcome Rotarian Dan Bramsky to announce an upcoming donation drive. Welcome, Dan.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Hello, all fellow Rotarians. I just want to let you know on behalf of the Homelessness Solutions Committee, we are going to celebrate our next in-person meeting next Tuesday. We are inviting you to bring any gently used or new water bottles, reusable water bottles like you see behind me, and we are going to do a drive for them. We've already had a couple club members commit to bringing some, and we're hoping that we can continue to add to that. So please bring go through your cupboards, go through your kitchen, and see what you can find, and please bring them next Tuesday. And I'm excited to announce after that when we how many we'll collect that will go to a good purpose to help those who need them in our community. If you have any questions, feel free to give me or send me an email, and I'll actually put my contact information in the chat right now. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Dan. Excellent cause. I'll be bringing a water bottle, certainly. I appreciate you putting that together. Thank you so much. Next up, please welcome our President-elect nominee and membership chair, Rotarian Terry Goldman, to announce an upcoming Gearing Up training. Here's Terry.
Thank you, President Reed. I appreciate it. And Ken Franson actually is the person that referred James Mills. So thank you to our member, Ken Franson. And James, we're looking forward to welcoming you to the club. As part of James's new experience with Rotary, we will do a Gearing Up session for him. And we are looking for you, fellow Rotarians, to help us with those Gearing Up sessions. So we'll be offering 2 trainings coming up. One on Tuesday, August 10th, right before our club, or a couple hours before our club meeting. We'll do it at 10 a.m. and then we'll do a Gearing Up with James and several other new Rotarians that have applied at 11 o'clock. And you're welcome to stay, and I'll be leading that Gearing Up, and join us as we show these new Rotarians a great Rotary Club of Portland welcome. And then we'll also, if you're not able to join us on the 10th, we'll be offering the training again on Tuesday, August 17th. And I believe that is again at 10 a.m. Just looking on my calendar. Yes, it is at 10 a.m. So please join us for one of those 2 trainings, and you can help us welcome the newest Rotarians to our club. And hopefully we've got a big goal this year of 50 plus new members, and you can all help us get there. So let's do it together and help welcome newest Rotarians to the greatest Rotary Club in the universe, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. Terry's doing an awesome job with our membership committee. I appreciate all the hard work he's putting in there. He's doing a wonderful job, set some lofty goals, which I'm excited to help him meet. So thank you so much, Terry. And now we're going to take a quick break to chat with our fellow Rotarians. In a moment, we will be split into smaller groups for a virtual table talk for about 10 minutes. Please be sure to introduce yourselves to the others in the group. You are welcome to chat freely, but if you need a topic of discussion, it's camping season. Let's hear about one of your favorite camping memories and what you like or maybe don't like about camping. And here we go. And now it's time to hear from our keynote speaker of the week. After our speaker has finished, please feel free to ask any questions. Corinne will be moderating the Q&A through the chat box. And now please, past President Rotarian Deb Dian is today's chair of the day. Welcome, Deb.
Thank you, Reed. It's my pleasure to introduce our resident geologist and past president, Scott Burns, who will talk about the Lake Ridge rhyolite boulder and the mystery of how it got to Lake Oswego. Scott, tell us your story.
Thank you very much, Deb. And let's see if we can do a little share screen here. And let's see. Now, can you guys see this yet? You can. Good. All right. Well, what I want to do is talk to you about an incredible learning period of time that we did just a couple of months ago, and then which relates back to how science works and the Missoula floods. And the Great Missoula floods fashioned most of the area that we have around the Portland, Vancouver area. In fact, 16,000 square miles in the Pacific Northwest. And here's a picture right at the beginning. I'm going to let you see that. Of this incredible boulder that the news traveled around the world. And it's called the Lake Ridge Rhyolite boulder because it was found when they were excavating Lake Ridge Middle School in Lake Oswego, and it is rhyolite. But in order to appreciate my whole story, I've got to tell you a little bit about, well, we got to get this thing going here. There we go. The Missoula floods, which affected the Pacific Northwest. And so I've given this talk, I'm just going to condense my normal 25-minute talk into 5 minutes. On the cataclysms on the Columbia, the Great Missoula Floods. And so a few years ago, I rewrote the book called Cataclysms on the Columbia, written by John Elliott Allen and Marjorie Burns. All three of us are native Oregonians, all professors at Portland State, published by Ooligan Press from Portland State, about one of the greatest geological events that occurred in the Pacific Northwest yet, and also the world, and how science works and how it doesn't. And it's based on the ideas of this guy here, J. Harlan Bretz, a geologist who was a professor up at the University of Washington and then later at the University of Chicago, who actually, when he went to Eastern Washington, he saw these gigantic, huge areas, rivers that looked like huge floods, and carved them out. And he saw places like large cataclysms, like dry falls, which probably looked as if it was a big waterfall in the past. And then he saw huge, gigantic deposits and dunes, etc., on the river that only could have been created by very, very large floods. We as geologists can look at the wavelengths of all of these deposits that you got there and back calculate and get velocities, and to have created the West Bar south of Wenatchee would have taken velocities up to 50. And then as you go up in the gorge just east of the Dalles, and so here's a picture looking across. The Columbia River is down on the other side of the guardrail. You can see where the bedrock there, the Columbia River basalt, has been eroded away. And then as you go up the slope, you will see what we call loess, windblown silt, eroded away, and by floods in the past. And you say, whoa, these are huge floods, because when the river now floods, it only gets maybe 4 or 5 meters at the most above the river, and we're talking hundreds of meters up. And so what Bretz did is he put together a paper back in 1923 about the Spokane flood. But now it's morphed into what we call the Missoula floods. And to kind of summarize the whole thing, back during the Ice Age and the end of the Ice Age from 15 to 18,000 years ago, you had the large ice sheets coming down from up in Canada, even over here in Montana, coming down. But there was one lobe. This is that upper part of Idaho, as you can see here. That's the Pend Oreille Valley. One lobe really grew when everything else was kind of receding. And it came down and it dammed up the major river that was draining all of western Montana, called the Clark Fork River. And so all the water that was coming into there was being dammed, was forming a lake. That dam got up to 1,700 feet in size. That's 3 Space Needles stacked one on top of another, creating a lake that went back to Missoula, Montana. And we call it Glacial Lake Missoula. And it was half the size of Lake Michigan, 530 cubic miles, and then eventually that dam broke. And all that water went cascading down through Spokane, across eastern Washington, and just eroding away all of the sediment in the soils, forming the channel scablands, and then all that water getting back into the Columbia River at Wallula Gap. But it couldn't all go through at one time, so it backed up and hit a large lake up there we call Lake Lewis, after Meriwether Lewis. And then the water came down the Columbia Gorge. The Columbia Gorge was always there. And then you had another lake here, another lake that we have, and then came down the gorge. The gorge was always here. and it came all the way down into Portland, hit the Tualatin Mountains of the West Hills. A lot of it bounced up through Kalama out into the ocean. Some of it went through Lake Oswego and filled up the Tualatin Valley, and the rest of it went down through Oregon City, West Linn, filled up the Willamette Valley to 400 feet elevation. We had a lake 400 feet deep here in Portland for a couple of weeks. Then all that water would go out into the ocean. And then what happened was, then the dam reformed. And another couple hundred years, you would have a new dam, a new lake, and then it would again break and you would have another flood. So we had 40 floods that made it all the way down towards Wallula Gap, and 40 floods to Portland, 80 floods or 90 floods to the Spokane area. And so carving out 16,000 square miles in the Pacific Northwest and in the Portland area and the Willamette Valley, affecting things, is one of the greatest stories around. And so we thank J. Harlan Bretz for coming up with that. He went against the thinking of the day of all the geologists. Geologists said, no, landforms are formed very, very slowly, not catastrophically. And he said, well, it sure looks to me like it's catastrophic. In the end, he outlived all the detractors that said he was wrong. He lived to be 98. And so we tell our students today, when you have good data, stick to it. And eventually, you'll outlive all the detractors that say that you are wrong. And then additional work since Brett's, we found that there are many floods, because he was only talking about 1 or 2 floods. And this is just outside of Touchy, Washington. And you can see all these layers that are here in the dirt or in the sediment. And each one was probably formed by a different flood. And Richard Waite is the geologist who came up with that idea. And so today, when we talk about these Missoula floods, we say in the old radiocarbon years, and we don't use radiocarbon years anymore. Now we convert them to regular calendar years, 15 to 18,000 years ago. We had 40 events that came to Portland, 90 events to Spokane. And so they really affected the Pacific Northwest. And if we look at freshwater flood around the world in all different countries and everywhere, it's the second largest one that we have ever found. The biggest one is in Altai, Russia. And most of in fact, the top 10 are all ice dam failures, just like the one that we talked about there. If we go back up to the Missoula area, this is what the lake looked like. It was just all the interconnecting valleys with all of the water in it. There's good old Missoula. And if we go to Missoula, you can see up in back of the campus, and Missoula are the arch enemies of Portland State University, the Grizzlies there. And those are the old beaches. You can see them better in the lower photo here of Glacial Lake Missoula. And each flood got less and less in size, so therefore the water wasn't going up and down. It was always going down with each one of the floods, preserving all those beaches from the past. So that is this story. And then all that water scoured all of eastern Washington. And I don't have time to go into it. Then it came into Oregon through Wallula Gap. 530 cubic miles have got to go through that. Where I took this picture, I'm in Washington, and everything you see in the front is Oregon. It came down the gorge. And this is just in eastern, just on the other side of the Dalles. And if we were watching as the floodwaters came down, it would take about a half an hour for this whole valley to fill up, and it would flow for 2 weeks. And then it came all the way down through the gorge. The gorge was always there. And this is up in the Bonneville area. Now, this landslide here came down in 1411. So that was not created by the Missoula floods, but all the things to the left, all the Washington side is just all landslide deposits that you have got. Came down the gorge. Beacon Rock used to be a volcano. It's the youngest volcano in the gorge. In fact, in all the Portland area, and it scoured the whole thing away, just leaving the pipe in the middle, a volcanic pipe, and that is Beacon Rock. And then the waters continued down, and they undercut Crown Point and the Vista House up here. And this big, huge rock used to be right up here, and it was undercut. Came down in a landslide to this, and that's Rooster Rock, where it was deposited in the Columbia Valley. And so it had incredible effects, all 40 of the floods that made it down here. And then as the water came into Portland, it came out of the gorge at 50 to 60 miles an hour, hit 2 volcanoes, Prune Hill, which is over here in Camas, and Rocky Butte, which was in Portland. And as the water comes in, it hits them, and then it's deflected around the north side, around Lacamas Lake, carving out a valley here, and then Burnt Bridge Creek. And then Rocky Butte went around one side, but then it also carved a valley that we call Sullivan's Gulch. That's where I-84 is today. Now, in back of both of these volcanoes, the velocity decreased, and so a lot of sediment and gravel and cobbles came out, forming a pendant bar of sediment. And you go over into Vancouver, you have the Mill Plain Pendant Bar. In North Portland, you have the Alameda Ridge Pendant Bar, all gravels and cobbles, all created by the great Missoula floods as the waters came in. And as the water came into Portland, the whole basin became wide open. And so the velocity decreased. And so in back of Troutdale, you have a huge bar just above it that was created. And other bars of sediment all the way out to the Hawthorne district in Portland, also created by those incredible floods. And then the water came through, and a lot of it went through Lake Oswego. Look at this picture down here. Look at the big fan of sediment that has carved out from here and deposited over here. And then big boulders that are bouncing down through the Portland area eventually made it through here too. And then the rest of the water went down through Oregon City and West Lynn and filled up the Willamette Valley. And then we had a lake in Portland up to 400 feet elevation for a couple of weeks. And then that water had to come back out. And so you had incredible head of water down in Oregon City. And you, instead of making a sharp left turn where the river does today, it went way out here. And then it cut to the left through Kellogg Creek and then the Clackamas Town Center, which is right here. And then it carved through east side of Portland, the east side commercial district, right through the Lucky Labrador brew pub. And geologists always use brew pubs as our geographic markers that we have got. And then what happened was it came out and it formed a big eddy bar on Alameda Ridge, the pendant bar, and that is what we call Swan Island. There was also the other side, a huge lake called Giles Lake. That in 1905, the Lewis and Clark Exposition, they built the world's largest log cabin on that, which burned down in 1963, but all kids growing up in Portland always visited that. Then the fathers of Portland said, no, we're going to take all of the silt out of the mountains and fill in the lake, and so the lake is not there. So that's the story in Portland. So using a student in the Portland State, the geology department, this is what downtown Portland would have looked like. We would have had a lake that deep for 2 weeks in Portland. And so the water came through Lake Oswego, filled up the Tualatin Valley, and then when it reached 400 feet elevation, it went back down through Gaston and Newburgh into the Willamette Valley, or the Tonkin Scablands between Sherwood and Tualatin, or through Tualatin, and then some of it actually went back through Lake Oswego. And if you are in Lake Oswego, so we go back to the picture here, all the sediment that came through was deposited in this big, huge delta out here. And I used to take my students in the early 90s into the pit that was just to the west of Lake Oswego. There is now an incredible wall built on the top of it. But look at all the foreset beds. Lake Oswego is to the right, and then Tualatin and Sherwood to the left-hand side, and all of these were deposited by the Great Missoula Floods. Now, in the Portland area, what is the normal rock that we have here? See the dark rock here? That is Columbia River basalt. The gray rock is boring lavas, all basalt, basalt, basalt. But now and then you see a white rock. That's granite. There's no granite around here. Those were all ice rafted in on icebergs from the breaking up of that dam up there in that Pondere Valley up in northern Idaho. Another incredible ice rafted erratic that we have here is the most famous meteorite in the United States, the Willamette meteorite. And then, as you can see, it was found out in West Lynn, just at 400 feet elevation. And Dick Pugh, a geology professor in our department, went out, and where it was found, it should have created a gigantic crater, but there was no crater, but there were a whole bunch of granite fragments all around it. We think it was ice rafted in. And another one of these is on your way to Lincoln City on the coast. There'll be a big sign that says Glacial Rock to the right. Up at the 400 feet elevation is argillite. There is no argillite around here. That is a metamorphic type of rock that we have here, ice rafted in, that we have got. And so here is Lake Oswego. We're looking to the west. And so the waters came through here, and then here's the big fan to the west side, and that is, and then the high school, the middle school, Lake Ridge Middle School was right in here, and so a lot of these boulders that were formed from here were deposited. One of our newest national parks is a new concept. It's called the Ice Age Flood Geological Trail. Instead of going to see a mountain, going to see a canyon, going to see something that is stationary, you follow a geological concept from Astoria all the way up to Missoula, following the concept of the Great Ice Age Floods or the Missoula Floods. And so there will be 15 visitor centers all the way from there down to here. The first one in the Portland area, this last year and a half, we have a foundation, we have a video. It will be shown at the starting in the fall at the library, but eventually we'll have our own visitor center, and you can take your passport, your national park passport, and get it stamped there by the Ice Age Flood Tour and the Portland Basin. So that is the story on the Missoula floods. 89 plus floods, 40 of them getting to Portland, velocities up to 60 miles an hour. If you took the flows, that is cubic meters per second of all of the major rivers in the world, add them all together, it equals the first flood that we had there. And as I said, affected 16,000 square miles in the Pacific Northwest. And the maximum flood was the very first one, 530 cubic miles that you have gotten, 50 cubic miles of ice. And the ages are between 15 and 18,000 calendar years ago. The older ones, for the last 2 million years, we call ancient cataclysmic floods, and there are remnants of those. I don't have time to go into those. Were humans here? Yes. And we have interviews in our new visitor center that is coming out of Native Americans talking about floods where they could row from one side of the Willamette Valley to the other side. So now let's finish up with the boulder. The Rhyolite. And so here is superintendent of the job, Skanska, and this is Jacob Parker. And he's a hero to me because he noted something and he said, we need to have a geologist to come in and check out what it is. And this is what led to the story. And there's the boulder in the front. And so of him. And so what was happening, they were rebuilding the middle school there on Jean Road in Lake Oswego. And so when they had to excavate the whole place, they had huge numbers of boulders underneath there. It caused $1 million in change orders to add to the cost of the building just because they didn't expect it. If they had asked me, I would have said, you're going to have lots of boulders down there because that from the formation of Lake Oswego. And so being a good guy, he was going around looking at all of these. And they take a rock hammer like a good geologist and bang on and to look at inside. All of them are black and gray, all basalt. And then he came across this guy, and he said, "Whoa, this looks completely different than all of these other basalt boulders that are there." And so he took a picture of it, and you can go to a website with your picture, and it will give you an estimation. And this was the picture he sent in, and it said back. It is uraninite, which is a uranium-bearing rock. And he went to the principal and he said, we have uranium back there. And he said, whoa, we don't want that. We don't want our kids getting there. So he said, get in touch with a geologist. And so they got in touch with me. And I came out and I looked at it and said, no, that's not uraninite. That is rhyolite, which is a volcanic rock. But boy, it's rare. It's never found on this side of the Cascades. It's all over eastern Oregon and northeastern Washington. And so, the school district was very excited about that. And it was a major, major find. And so here is a picture, and then they put together a nice little poster that was right next to it. And so the school district in Skanska said, what are we going to do with this boulder? And Skanska said, we got to turn this into a press release because our superintendent found this incredible boulder that has an incredible story. And so therefore, we need to have a press conference. And Lake Oswego School District said, yeah, that's really good. Then the principal, Dr. Schultz, said, hey, we got to turn it into a teachable moment. And so when we do the press conference, let's invite the students out to hear Dr. Burns tell about all of this. And in the end, it turned into a media frenzy. It was on 3 channels in Portland and TV, and then it went nationally and it went international. This is the news from all of this. And so let me just finish up talking about it. And so here is a picture of me talking to the students. And so at the middle school, kids only went half a day. This was back in May 17th. And so half the students went in the morning, half in the afternoon. And here is Dr. Schultz here, and he brought a little portable microphone out, and I'm talking to a couple 250 students in the morning. And so it was the last class of the day. They came out, and the principal said, tell them about the geology of the Lake Oswego area. And then secondly, I said, you've got 2 volcanoes, Cook Butte on one side, and then you have Mount Sylvania on the other side. And so you got 2 local volcanoes, much younger than the Columbia River basalts. And then I talked about the Missoula floods and the boulder. And here's the boulder in front of me. And then they had lots of questions, probably 20, 25 questions, then we cut it off. And then they said, and then, okay, in the afternoon, we'll have the press conference at 2 o'clock. We'll invite the students to come out at 1:30. Burns, you can talk to them at 1:45. And then when you're done talking to them, then we'll have the talking heads all lined up in a row, and I would be one of the talking heads. Well, what happened was the TV stations all arrived early. They filmed my part, and then they wanted to interview the students. And it just went into pandemonium when 250 students are out there, all wanting to be on TV, all wanting to give their impressions of this rock that was there. And what happened in the end, they never had the press conference. But the bottom line is it went onto 3 different TV channels in Portland at all different times. Here is, again, Jacob Parker, very proud of him, and there's the Rhyolite Boulder, the poster that they've got in the background. And so, as I mentioned, the first morning session went great, afternoon went into pandemonium, but in the end, made into a lot of newspapers. But then it went national. UPI and ABC picked it up nationally, and I was getting emails from friends coast to coast in the United States. Burns, we heard about your Rhyolite boulder out there, and on either in TV or in the newspapers. And then what we did is we moved the thing. And we moved it from the middle school because we didn't want to leave it at the middle school because we don't want a lot of tourists coming to the school. You don't want outside people coming there. So we have a collection of them at the Tualatin Heritage Center. So here we are picking it up and then putting it into a trailer. And Brian Clapton, a local guy, has been transporting these old erratic boulders over to Tualatin. We have a collection of them in the Tualatin Heritage Center. There's Brian on the left-hand side, and we're unloading it over in Tualatin, and so it has a lot of friends around there. And then we put it right over this in this one particular area. This is what the city of Tualatin said you can put it there. And then on the left-hand side, you can see myself and other members of the board of the Tualatin Ice Age Foundation and Brian over here. And there's the Rhyolite Boulder. And so if any of you are interested in going to see it, you can go over and see it in Tualatin at the Heritage Center right next to the police department. And then we made the front page of the Lake Oswego Review. Wow, wow, wow. And then we did the same thing for the Tualatin Times in Tualatin. But the amazing thing is it went international. And a friend of mine in Borneo, the Borneo Bulletin picked it up, and it talked about my interview on KATU TV. And so not only did we go national, but international, and I'm well connected internationally, and I was getting emails from Britain and Germany and Italy and places like that about my Rhyolite boulder. But then what happened is next week, I got probably 10 to 20 calls. Could you come out and check out my boulder? I want to see if it is as rare as your particular boulder. This is one that I went out to, and it was a great find. And then everybody wants me to identify their rock too, and so I've got a backlog of all of those. So in conclusions, what do we get out of this? The Missoula flood story is an incredible story. I enjoy talking about it all of the time. And that's why we rewrote the book, especially to get people to go out and follow the whole Ice Age trail. And an incredible find, and I love it when different contractors, etc., find something geological. They call me up, and then we can put it together. And anytime there's a big hole in the ground, there's a story there, and we do that today. So you can go out and visit it at the Tualatin Ice Age Heritage Center there. And the question is, how was it brought there? Was it ice rafted? I don't think so. I think it somehow got into the Columbia River, and flood after flood after flood would bounce it along the bottom, maybe 5 or 6 miles each time, and where it is. And so I'm going to be presenting it at a national conference. We've got 7,000 geologists coming to Portland coming up in October, and one of the papers there is going to be, where did this come from? Missoula floods brought it in here, but how? So we really don't know. So that is the story of the Lake Ridge Rhyolite Boulder, the media frenzy, and the teachable moment. So thankful to Dr. Schultz at the high school, allowing the students to hear about it. And so thank you to the program committee for allowing me to talk about the Missoula floods.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Scott. We now have a few moments for some questions. If you have one, please type "I have a question" in the chat box, and Corinne will call on you. Corinne, do we have any questions in the queue?
Got Chris Ackerman raising his hand.
Thank you.
So Scott, I always thought, that the Willamette meteorite, for instance, came as part of it's encased in an iceberg. If we look at the collections of erratics around, why do you think it's different for this rock? And what's the percentage of ice dams versus ones that just were rolled? And is there a way to tell which is which?
Yeah, and so the ones that are rolled, for instance, I showed you all those boulders, the basalt boulders that were right next to the middle school. All of the boring lava, basalt boulders, all were rolled because they were never all the way up in the Idaho, and also most of the Columbia River basalts boulders also came down the Columbia River. And so those are all rolled. They were nice. So the erratics, the ones that are not rock found around here, the granites, the argillites, and things like that, those are the ones that are ice rafted, like the Willamette meteorite. But there isn't a huge amount of that rhyolite up in Canada to be encompassed down into the ice dam. And so we have to find, so we're actually putting a master's student on this problem, and this will turn into a master's thesis. First of all, the complete analysis of the rhyolite, and then try and match it to the outcrops that we find in Oregon and Washington and Idaho, and see where did it come from. So that's what we're going to be doing. Good question.
Angel Pilato has the next question.
Scott, wonderful presentation. Always learn so much from you. Question, is the dam still collecting ice up there?
No, I mean, the climate's going in the wrong direction, Angel, right now. It's getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and we need the thing to completely reverse and go into a major glaciation, and that will take a major change, and I don't know if it'll ever happen. We are producing a wee bit of the carbon dioxide and methane going into the atmosphere.
Danielle's next.
Thanks, Scott. I'm curious about the rhyolite. Are there other places in the US or around the world where that particular type of rock is found?
Danielle, that's a wonderful question. And also, thank you for your talking earlier about We Rock at the beginning. And what a way to open the meeting. I mean, when I was president, how did we end the meetings? It was always geology rocks. No, Rotary rocks. It was there. So, Danielle, that's a great question, and I didn't cover it. Rhyolite is a volcanic rock, but it only comes out of very, very explosive volcanic eruptions. And these are volcanic eruptions that put a lot of energy into it, and a lot of ash and cinder and lapilli into the atmosphere. And then it will ooze out at the end. It's the magma that is left in the, and it's just loaded with quartz in it, and it's pure quartz is what it is. And so you don't find that on this side of the of Oregon, but from Bend and Madras all the way out to the Blue Mountains, there were huge eruptions, violent eruptions from about 40 million years ago until about 20 million years ago. A lot of them ended up with rhyolite. So in Oregon, we have huge amounts of this rhyolite over in that northern part of Oregon. And then also way up in northeastern Washington, you have some of these violent volcanoes too, with the rhyolite being produced. And the top guy in the state in rhyolite is the chairman of my department. So after I made the diagnosis, I said, Martin Streck, you know, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Yeah, he said, Burns, you're a shovel geologist. What do you know about hard rock? But he said, you're right. So it is a rhyolite. But we're going to have a thesis done on this and maybe tie it into where it is. Then we have to figure out how to get it into the Columbia River and have the floods kind of transport it down. So thank you very much.
So Scott, are we certain that didn't come from Mount St. Helens? Did it not produce any rhyolite?
There was a little bit of rhyolite that came out there, but then how are you going to get that all the way down into the Columbia River and then get it down here? And actually, Mount St. Helens is a very young volcano, so you know it's less than 50,000 years old. So it is the baby of all the volcanoes that we have got there, and most of the rock coming out of there is dacite, which has a little more different composition than just pure quartz like this rhyolite that we have here.
Okay, I know how I'd get into the Columbia River. It'd be a 3-point swish from Damian Lillard. Anyways, thank you so much, Scott. That was a fascinating presentation. I always enjoy hearing from you. I know all of our members do as well. We hear rave reviews every time you present, so thank you so much. And next week, we will be hearing from Tim Leatherman on the challenges faced and lessons learned while designing the Popular Pocket survival tool and the details of how it all happened. Don't forget next week's meeting on August 3rd, we will be meeting in person back at the Sentinel. Pre-registration for the in-person meeting is required. Please visit our website for registration as it is likely to fill up soon. And please make sure your friends don't miss out. Give them a call, a text, or an email and remind your fellow Rotarians that our next meeting will be in person at the Sentinel. And remember, if you have a speaker idea, you can submit them on our website. Siobhan will put that link in the chat now. All right, I would like to thank Daniil for your reflection today, and thanks to Dan for introducing the donation drive. I'll be sure to bring a water bottle next week to our meeting. Terry, thank you for your updates on the Gearing Up training, and to Deb for providing our speaker introduction today. And lastly, certainly not the least, thank you so much to Scott. We appreciate you making the time for your presentation. As always, it was a fantastic presentation, and we're already looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much, Scott. Okay, I have one last announcement before we close the meeting. As all of you know, our club is going through a lot of transition now and over the next several months, and part of that transition will be downsizing our staff. Unfortunately, that means today's meeting will be our last meeting with Siobhan. So Siobhan has been an integral part of our team, has done an incredible job in her position and filling in for Corinne when she was out on maternity leave. Siobhan was not just a great employee, but part of our Rotary family. We will be very sad to see her go, so please be sure to reach to Siobhan via the chat or her email. Let her know how much she will be missed and how much she was appreciated while she was here. Thank you so much, Siobhan. Personally and from our club, we appreciate everything you've done for us. And we wish you the very best. As we close today's meeting, let's all remember why we're here. We serve to change lives. Let's continue to focus on the lives that we change and continue to step up and do the right thing. Thanks again for joining. This meeting is adjourned.